So, Bethel 7th grade first year confirmation students, we have a second video dealing with worship. I am going to assume that many of you are involved in something that requires practice. Could be a sport, could be an instrument of some sort, could be dance, ballet, gymnastics. How do you get good at that? Well, we get good at things because we do them over and over and over again until they become second nature. Worship is like that. We continue to come to worship over and over and over again, and eventually it just becomes part of who we are. It becomes an important part of our spirit. We come every week, even as we practice every day those things that are important to us. So what in the world does worship do for a seventh grade student? Oh, there are so many things that worship can and will do for you. One, it's a place to connect with people of all ages. Think of that. We have people who attend Bethel who are 0, that is, they are infants, to over 100 years old. Where else do you come into the breadth of people like that? Most of your activities are relatively age segregated. In your schools, in your sports, your interest groups, you tend to pal around with people who are mostly your own age or maybe yours and your parents' ages. Here, you are with everybody. Second, at church, you have an opportunity to hear messages that you won't ordinarily hear in other places of your life. For instance, if you mess up enough on your sports team, you're probably not going to hear the message, well, that's okay. We forgive you. We'll do better together. Eventually, you get a chance to sit the bench. If you don't turn in your work at school, your teachers are not likely to say, that's okay. Instead, at the church, you will hear, yeah, we would love you to turn in your papers, but that doesn't mean you are anything less than a child of God. If you go to Quick Trip and you don't have money to pay for what you want, they are not likely to say, just go ahead, take it. Whereas at the church says, these are the gifts that God gives to you. They are free of charge. You get to do some things at the church that you hear and do nowhere else, like hearing music. Now, it may not be your favorite kind of music, but it's different. Where else will you hear an organ? Bethel has an organ that is bigger than anything in southeastern Minnesota, one of the biggest in Minnesota. You can't hear organ music in many places these days other than the Twins Stadium and churches. Other sacred music, again, maybe not your most favorite kind of music, but it helps build you up. You understand more of that. It's also a place to connect with ancient rites like the Lord's Prayer. Do you know that we've been praying that prayer for 2,000 years? Can you think of anything else in your life that you repeat that's 2,000 years old? The Star Spangled Banner or the Pledge of Allegiance? Nope, not going to happen. A popular song, one of the most popular songs of today? No, of course not. That would be only months or maybe years old. When you start saying the Lord's Prayer, you are saying something that is already being said all around the world in many languages. No matter when you start saying the Lord's Prayer in church or at home, you are joining with people around the world who are saying that prayer, always gracing God's ears. You are connecting with people around the world. And of course, finally, in church, you are connecting with God in a special way. Now, you connect with God at home. You connect with God at school. You connect with God in nature. But God's people have set apart a special place where we might come to be together and connect with God. All those things and many more. And I know that if you continue to come to worship week after week after week, you will simply get better at it. It will become part of the fabric of your being. So, to that end, I will tell you a few stories. The first one about a very old man. He would not mind my saying he's a very old man. Pastor Bob Anka, who is 97 years old. He's that fellow who often has shaken your hand or greeted you as you've come to worship on Sunday mornings. It was about 30 years ago that his wife died. They had retired together, they had a good retirement in mind, but within a year, his beloved wife Dolores had died. This was just a couple of days before Christmas. When Christmas came, Pastor Anka was found in church, and some people were surprised. They said, Pastor Anka, your wife just died. We wondered, why is it that you are here rather than home or with family? And he replied, this is my family. Where would I rather be? That's the sense of connecting with others and connecting with God. You can learn that from a very old man. Let's go to a ninth grader. Steve lost his father when he was in ninth grade, a tragic heart attack. I went over to their home, visited with the family. We planned a funeral. We had the funeral. After the funeral, there is ordinarily a family luncheon. I couldn't find Steve in that luncheon. I wondered where he had gone. I was concerned about him. So I started looking through the church. Sure enough, I found him in the worship center, the sanctuary. He was sitting in the third pew, just sitting and looking at the cross. I sat down beside him. We said nothing for a little while. Finally, I said, Steve, what are you thinking? He said, Pastor Wahl, my dad isn't going to see me graduate. I said, yeah, Steve, I think you're right about that. On the other hand, is it possible that your dad will be part of that great cloud of witnesses in the sky that will encourage you in these next few years until you do graduate? And that he will see you in a far different light than he was able to a week ago? Well, Steve continued on in life. Today, Steve is about 40 years old. He has stayed connected with the church. He remembers how the church connected with him, even when it was a very tough time. You know, little kids connect with church as well. It is not uncommon that a parent will come to me, a parent of a small child. In fact, you probably were some of those small children, and your mom or your dad came to me, and they said something like, Pastor Wahl, you'll never believe what, fill in your name, said in the back seat on the way home from church. And sure enough, they would quote something from the sermon. They would start singing a song. They would do a part of the liturgy that we do together. They might repeat the children's word. You know, kids really listen. They might not look like they're listening. You might not look like you are listening, but you are picking things up when you are in church. It is a great place to be, a great place to feel welcome. And one last story. This one about a 2-year-old. The 2-year-old and his family came to church on an ordinary Sunday. It was an ordinary worship service with an ordinary sermon, ordinary songs. They had communion. After communion, the little 2-year-old crawled up onto his mother's lap and pressed his face close to hers. She kind of pushed him away a little bit just for room to breathe. And he continued to come in real close to be right in her face. She said, "What are you doing?" And the little boy said, "You smell like Jesus." Oh, that little boy is more perceptive and right than he even knew himself. This woman smelled like Jesus, the body and blood of Jesus Christ in the bread and the wine. Little kids can teach us. So I pray that you will find great meaning in worship. The worksheet today is very short, just a couple of questions that you can work through with your parents. I pray that you will make worship an every week pattern in your life. You will be blessed in endless ways.